for being here. I'm Justin. I'm the volunteer coordinator for Homeless Garden Project. Every March 31st, we try to honor Cesar Chavez. I realize it is April 1st, so we're a day late. But it's our observed day for honoring Cesar Chavez for the work he's done for farm workers' rights, for social justice, just for civil rights in general, and so we generally have a day of service out here that most of you have been participating in, and I just want to thank, we've gotten food from Snap Taco and Smart Chicken, and actually Angie too, our amazing retail and value-added manager has also cooked for you all. My pleasure to introduce Ann Lopez, who is the Executive Director for the Center for Farmworker Families. She's also an emerita professor at San Jose City College, and an independent researcher and author of The Farm Worker's Journey, which she will tell you about, I hope. She has been recognized for her work by the U.S. Congress, chosen as Woman of the Year in 2013 and 2014 by the National Association of Professional Women, and then last March of 2018 she was chosen for the Cesar E. Chavez Community Awards in Watsonville. So rather than me talking about her, I'm going to give it more time for her to talk about her different projects. So my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ann Lopez.
Well, it is my pleasure to be in this beautiful spot in the world, and I'm even more impressed after talking with Justin about all of the wonderful things this garden represents and does for people. I mean, this is such an asset in the community, and I've always thought it was wonderful, but to hear how it integrates with the larger society is nothing less than inspiring, so thank you. Yes. So what I want to do is follow Justin's suggestion. I'm going to talk about the challenges of farm workers, and then some of the breakthroughs. We've had quite a few this past year, I'm happy to say. And then maybe some of the ways that you as individuals or as a group can become involved. That's what, yeah. So as far as the challenges go, I'm going to start by talking about how I got into the business of working with farm workers. And I did a PhD up at UC Santa Cruz, starting in, it's been so long, 94, and I worked on it for 8 years, and I studied the impact of the North American Free Trade Agreement on the farms in Mexico. And I interviewed families on 22 farms in west central Mexico, and then I came up here and interviewed their relatives in Salinas and Watsonville to find out what it was like to make that transition, leaving the farm and coming up here. And quite frankly, I was absolutely distressed and appalled that I was a member of a citizen of a country that would create such a humanitarian disaster as NAFTA has created. Salinas de Gortari, then president at the time, estimated that 1 million families, 1 million farmers would leave their land every year for the first 15 years of NAFTA. And so that's basically what happened. It took a sustainable farming system in Mexico that's been in place now for 7,000 to 9,000 years, and basically destroyed it and tore apart the family, so someone had to come up here to work for the family to survive. And if any of you are interested, I wrote an article here on how that happened and the steps and so on. So if you're not informed, it's not your fault, because what I noticed is that nowhere in the media was there a big expose about the disastrous impact of this trade agreement on Mexico, the countryside. So I was really distressed. I had planned to go into a university and teach and publish papers, which is basically what I was doing at San Jose City College, teaching biology and environmental science. And I had an epiphany in my office when I finished my dissertation and I had my degree. I was sitting there thinking about farm workers, and one of my issues is that they are treated like objects of the industrial farming system. And I just started yelling. I don't know where it came from, but I just started yelling, these are real live human beings. They have loves, they have hatreds, they have goals, they have families. Why are they having to go through this kind of torture? And I found that anytime I would go into almost anybody's apartment, if you can call it that, in Watsonville or Salinas, and ask them just the most neutral question, like, tell me about how you farmed in Mexico, within about a half hour, someone in the family would be sobbing. And that, I come from science. I was not prepared for the emotional load of this whole thing. And eventually we would stop and I'd ask them, can you tell us why you're so sad? I miss my mother in Mexico. My children are in Mexico and I don't know when I'll ever see them again. My grandmother is going to die soon and I won't be able to be with her. Oh, the stories. So the challenges, back to challenges for me, have been listening to the tales, the stories of absolute devastation that these people carry inside them, and also live day to day in Watsonville. I firmly believe we have a leftover from the slavery era right here in our own backyard. In fact, I've been thinking about writing a new book, Slavery in Your Own Backyard, because I think that's what we have. It's a modified version, and rather than humans owning other humans, like in the South, what we have is laws, institutions, regulations, and policies that keep these people trapped and from which escape is nearly impossible. So I decided I had to do something and that the public needed to be educated. So I speak everywhere about this because I think people don't know, and I've got all the data. And it should have been published long ago so that people would know what our trade policies are doing. It's just amazing to me that when the undocumented fallout of our trade policies appears at our southern border, people go crazy and act like this is unusual and something that shouldn't be done, and breaking our immigration laws and all of this, never seeming to recognize that we set up the laws and institutions, etc., that force them to leave their land as economic refugees in order to survive. I have not heard the Trump administration take any responsibility for any of this. All I've heard is demonization and basic disregard for the humanity of these people. So I decided that I needed to do something, and number one was to educate the public, and I had people supporting me, and then in time we developed a nonprofit, and the main thrust of our nonprofit is education, and also to not only inform the public about the difficult circumstances that farm workers face, but also to do what we can to make their lives better. And so that's the basic gist of our work. Today we do distributions, since they only make $13,000 to $17,000 a year, and no one can live in Santa Cruz County on that much money. And the agricultural system we have is completely dependent on their labor. So they're kept in a state of perpetual poverty, which is another challenge, because when I visit these people, their living circumstances are just completely unacceptable. And yet, because the majority of them are undocumented, at least 75%, they don't complain, because if they complain to their landlord about a sink that doesn't work or a toilet that doesn't flush or whatever, the landlord will just simply say, then just leave and put up a for rent sign, and the unit will be rented by that afternoon because there's such a scarcity of housing. So that's a challenge, knowing that they have no health insurance, they have no dental insurance, none of that. They live on a diet that is horrendous because they can't afford good food. In fact, a doctor that I work with at Salinas Hospital told me that he works exclusively with farm workers, and he said they all die of diabetes. And that's because, of course, they can buy cheap, sugary, carbohydrate type food, and that's about all they have. Their health is not good at all. The children, I go up and visit my grandbabies up in Sebastopol, and they're healthy and privileged and have fun and all of that. And then I go the next day to visit a farm worker family, and these kids are stunted in their growth, they're too thin. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on with them. So it's very challenging to face this kind of poverty day after day, knowing that in North County here, most of us live a very comfortable life. And also, in the past at least, there was absolutely nothing being done about this. In fact, when I first started my research, there were no articles about farm workers. It's as if they didn't exist. They were like this, everyone knew they were there, but no one knew anything about them, and there was no interest in finding out. So those are the challenges I face, is seeing how desperate they are, really, and feeling sometimes helpless to just transform the whole system, because I really believe it needs a total transformation. I think industrial agriculture is unsustainable. It accounts for 40% of greenhouse gases. It's dependent on this kind of slave labor, and I think it would be much better. In fact, there's 2 or 3 studies that show that if we converted to organic regenerative agriculture overnight, we could feed all humans. So my question is, why are we doing what we're doing with industrial agriculture when the price is so high? So those are some of the challenges. Now, the breakthroughs, right? Now for the good stuff. Okay. First of all, we worked 8 years to get rid of the 50-mile regulation in the state's migrant camps. Are you familiar with that? That's a regulation, one of the things that keeps people trapped, where if you move into the state migrant camps, and there's 24 of those, you can live there from April 1st, now it's April 1st, it used to be May 1st, until the end of November. And then in November, if you want to come back the next year, you have to move at least 50 miles away, live there and prove you've lived 50 miles away, and then you can come back the following May. And the migrant camps are really the only available affordable, decent housing. I mean, the prices of rent are very reasonable. However, it's almost all populated with families. So what this means, and every farm worker family, I should mention, that I've ever talked to wants their kids educated and out of farm work. That's what keeps them going. So they move their kids 50 miles away. The kids have to enroll in a whole nother school. Some families I talk to have their kids going to 4 schools in 2 countries in 2 languages every year. I mean, no one can be successful in that kind of situation. And so I started asking questions. I went up to Housing and Community Development in Sacramento, and I said, what's the purpose of this? And in my head, I'm thinking it's to guarantee the next generation of farm workers is what it is. And no one would give me an answer. And then I joined with Richard Hobbs, who's an immigration attorney, and he got upset by the whole thing. And then another organization, the Food Empowerment Project in Katati, joined us, and a couple of more attorneys, and we just started asking more and more questions. And so we hired a group of students at San Jose State to do an ethnographic study of the issue in the 4 largest migrant camps, including our Buena Vista here in Watsonville. And when we got the data, of course, it showed that all the parents wanted their kids in one location all year, stable education. We presented that as a PowerPoint at Housing and Community Development. Again, nothing. So I personally made 7 trips up to Sacramento to speak with these people. And finally, sort of a miracle happened because I was so frustrated that there was no movement. I mean, I learned personally how invested in the status quo some of these institutions are. I mean, the head of the HCD up there could have just waved a magic wand and gotten rid of this regulation, but he wouldn't do it. So then everyone knows our new lieutenant governor is Eleni Kounalakis, right? Everybody knows. Okay, she gave a talk in Aptos. Afterwards, I acknowledged her for her thinking, and she asked me what I do, and I told her, and she said, oh, I'd really like to meet some people in the migrant camp. Great. So I put her in my RAV4, took her over to the migrant camp, to the most vocal family about this issue, who are so upset about it. And I had her just sit down and listen to the stories I've been hearing about how they have to leave their kids with relatives if they want them to go to the same school. They miss their children. It splits up all of that. And within, I'd say, a half hour, she was so distressed that she picked up her cell phone and called the Attorney General, Javier Becerra. And from there, it went to Governor Brown, and he signed legislation to get rid of the 50-mile regulation. So that was a real win, finally. I was really pleased to see that. And so now, for the first time, we have people living year-round within the same school district, and their kids not having to move. So that's number 1 breakthrough. Number 2 is Dianne Feinstein and Zoe Lofgren came out with H.R. 641. Have you heard of this?
No.
No, you haven't? Well, now you're going to hear about it. I think it's called the Agricultural Labor something or other. I forgot the exact name of it. But anyway, it's H.R. 641. You can look it up on Google. And this would give any worker in the fields who works for 100 days a blue card, and they can't be deported.
Wow.
So this is a cure for fear. And the fear in that community is horrific. And then if they work 3 to 5 months, depending on the number of hours, they can get a green residency card, and I think that will allow them to go back to Mexico and see their relatives, which is really important. And then beyond that, they can get on a path to citizenship. Now, I don't have many doubts that that will pass the House, but I don't know how we can get it through the Senate. So any of you who want to start working on issues related to farm workers, that's probably the most important one. So that's that one. Then we have AB 1783. This is by Robert Rivas, who's the assembly person in Watsonville and San Benito County, I believe. And anyway, he's introduced this bill that will provide family housing for farm workers on the land where the grower apparently has the fields or has his land, and it will be managed by a nonprofit not associated with the grower. So if the farm worker has issues with the grower, then the grower can't threaten to throw them out or whatever. So that's exciting. And then the latest one is SB, what is it, 483, introduced by State Senator DeRosco, I believe. And this would get rid of chlorpyrifos from the state. Do you know about chlorpyrifos? Oh my God, what a hellacious chemical this is. It used to be sold as Lorsban and Dursban, and then they realized that this damages the developing brain of the children, and so they banned it for residential use, but you can use all you want in agriculture. So what happens, this stuff is an organophosphate that vaporizes and moves through the fields into the surrounding schools and classrooms. And if the mother is pregnant and working in the fields, it affects her fetus's IQ. And I can't tell you how many of these families, as if they didn't have enough issues to deal with, have children with ADHD who can't learn in school, who are behind and can't memorize, where their brains are obviously impacted. And, you know, when you have people that are growing up with these kind of disabilities, what can you expect from them other than to become farm workers? So I'm very suspicious of how the system sets these things up. So a special class of people, namely Latinos, has to continue this drudgery and can't escape. It's really tragic. So anyway, hopefully that will pass. So if you want the exact number, I'll find it. I have it on a little, I don't know what I did with my blue piece of paper. Oh, here it is. Okay. So the housing for families is AB 1783. So you might want to call Robert Rivas' office and tell him you support that. We want that to happen. And then the other one is Senate Bill SB 458. This is the one about chlorpyrifos. And this is by Maria Elena Durazo, is the senator. So what I'd like you to do again is maybe online or whatever, support this bill. We must get rid of this horrific, dreadful chemical. I mean, you know, it's got to be the worst of the worst. And it was due to be banned nationwide, but then the Trump administration stopped it, so that's a whole nother story. Yes.
These are Senate bills in California.
Yes. These are all bills, AB, whatever, 1783 and 458 Senate bill. They're California. And then HR 641 is at the federal level. So that would apply to all farm workers in the country. And that's, you know, this thing of living in constant fear. I mean, I have observed that. That's another challenge I face. And it's just, you know, like I invited farm workers to come to the film festival in Watsonville last night because they showed a film about farm workers, harvest season. I worked it out so they could get in free, and they don't show up because they're terrified to be in public places. I mean, this is just not the way to treat human beings. This is no way to treat human beings. So, especially a given class of human beings. I mean, you know, it's clearly a class and an ethnicity that's targeted. And again, I think it's left over from slavery in the South. I really do.